In the aftermath of World War II, the victorious Allied nations dispatched numerous military expeditions to the Antarctic region. Did these battleships weigh anchor in the name of science and exploration? Or did they set sail in search of something far more sinister, an evil that dwelt under the ice? No matter how many times Captain Halka and his crew spent the festive season scouring the waters around the Antarctic Peninsula, perpetual daytime was something that they never really managed to adapt to. The unending periods of daylight made it considerably easier to detect the invaluable whale pods they were desperately hunting. But it also reduced the ship's crew to little more than shambling, sleep-deprived zombies. This might have explained why the Juliana's lookout that morning had been so slow to react to the vessel now floating just a short distance off their starboard beam. Halka had been down in his cabin, staring dejectedly at his charts in the hope that they might somehow inspire him to reverse the fortunes of what had so far been a wasted journey all the way from their native Iceland. Then he'd heard the shouting coming from up above. The whaler's captain stood on deck alongside the rest of his crew, staring helplessly across the water at the deck gun that was now trained on their ship. Even without her infamous red and black naval ensign on display, there was no mistaking the sleek lines of the Kriegsmarine U-boat. There had been stories of German submarines that had either failed to hear or refused to obey the final orders to surrender. But the war had been over for more than 2 years now. Just what had they stumbled across? Figures in gray-green overalls were now hurrying across the deck of the submarine, and a short time later, 2 inflatables made their way towards the Juliana. With no weapons on board to defend themselves and no other ships in the vicinity to hear their transmissions, Halka ordered his men to line up and offer no resistance to their captors. As the Germans hauled themselves up over the railings, a figure broke away from their number and strolled enthusiastically over to where Halka was standing. The U-boat captain cheerfully apologized for the disruption, asking if it would be possible for him and his crew to purchase half of the remaining supplies aboard the whaling ship. Despite his affable and polite nature, there was a tone to the submariner's request that led Halka to believe refusal on his part would be unwise. He noted uneasily that each of the German sailors was armed with either a pistol or a carbine and reluctantly agreed to the proposal. He was immediately handed a thick roll of US dollars and was advised that there should be enough left over for each of his crew to receive a small bonus for their troubles. As the submarine commander turned to leave, he paused and asked Halka to bring one of his charts up from his cabin. He marked down a location not too far away, advising that a large school of humpback whales could be found there before saluting and disappearing back over the side of the ship. The Icelandic crew watched in bewilderment as the submarine turned away and slowly made its way off into the distance, never to be seen again. On the 2nd of December 1946, a flotilla of U.S. ships set off from the naval base in Norfolk, Virginia. The expedition had been designated Operation Highjump and consisted of 13 vessels, including the aircraft carrier USS Philippine Sea and the destroyers USS Henderson and USS Brownson. They had been ordered to make their way deep into the desolation of the Antarctic Circle to conduct a combination of military drills and scientific experiments. In charge of the operation was Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, Jr., a seasoned polar explorer who had carried out numerous civilian and military expeditions into the Antarctic. When the task force eventually arrived at its destination, it immediately began conducting extensive photo reconnaissance operations of the area. However, it was recalled only a few weeks later due to reports of dangerous weather conditions. Soon after the ships that had taken part in the operation returned to their respective home ports, rumors and stories about what had really happened began to circulate. Newspaper articles in the Chilean media claimed that the U.S. fleet had been attacked by unidentified flying craft that had inflicted heavy casualties, forcing the Americans to withdraw. Speculation only grew when, during a television interview about the mission, Admiral Byrd made a number of significant comments regarding America having to prepare herself for future attacks that might emanate from Antarctica. He specifically referred to the risk of aircraft attacking the United States from the South Pole and warned that his countrymen could no longer rely on their geographical distance from hostile nations as a means of defense. Almost immediately, a follow-up mission to the remote region was authorized, codenamed Operation Windmill. It was concluded in April of 1948. After this, American interest in the region seemed to wane, until the decision, over a decade later, to detonate 3 nuclear devices there. The rationale for this action was to test the effects of high-altitude nuclear explosions in the Earth's upper atmosphere. However, some believe America's brief fascination with the southern polar region might ultimately have been forgotten had it not been for the publication, in 1991, of a Soviet-era intelligence report that offered a very different explanation for the untimely conclusion of Operation Highjump. Allegedly compiled from transcripts of interviews between KGB agents and a handful of U.S. sailors involved in the expedition, the leaked dossier suggested that the American fleet had been attacked and driven away from Antarctica by an unknown hostile power. The report detailed that by mid-February 1947, American ships were making their way through the Weddell Sea when the USS Brownson became aware of unknown aircraft shadowing her movements. Initially described as fast-moving lights in the far distance, the contacts gradually drew closer and soon registered on the Brownson's radar screens. As the U.S. ships closed ranks, 5 of the craft began to overfly the fleet at low altitude, dodging and weaving between the tightly packed American vessels at breakneck speeds. Deeming their actions hostile, Captain Gimble ordered the Brownson's gunners to target the attackers. The destroyer immediately opened fire with her 40mm anti-aircraft cannons. Witnesses described the 5 unidentified aircraft as saucer-shaped and testified that as soon as the Brownson opened fire, the mysterious craft retaliated with beams of incredible light and heat. As fighter aircraft scrambled to launch from the deck of the USS Casablanca, they were burned out of the sky, their airframes and crews reduced to little more than ash by the attacker's advanced weaponry. American return fire proved relatively ineffective due to the superior speed and maneuverability of the attackers, but there was some success. As one of the mysterious craft passed over the USS Senate, a lucky shot from the submarine's deck gun caught it, the 5-inch shell sending the flying machine spinning wildly off course before it detonated violently upon impact with the water. Yet there was another, even greater explosion. The USS Maddox, a destroyer attached to the task force, sustained serious damage as a result of the relentless attack, including a fire that spread fatally to her magazines. The resultant explosion killed all those aboard, sending the stricken vessel to the seafloor. Realizing they were outmatched, the Americans spent the next few days retreating out of the area, continually harassed by their unknown attackers. The writer of the Soviet report speculated that the subsequent U.S. mission to the region had also failed to defeat the forces ranged against them and that the Americans had eventually resorted to nuclear weapons in a final bid to vanquish their mysterious opponent. The Soviet document was seized upon by commentators and conspiracy theorists as proof that something sinister lurked beneath the ice. For some, it was definitive evidence of extraterrestrial involvement, while for others, it suggested that a Nazi stronghold had survived the war. And then there were those who theorized that the truth lay in a combination of the two. That Hitler's fugitive forces had uncovered and utilized alien technology to build a Fourth Reich beneath the Antarctic ice caps.